Welcome to the third and final panel in the Hunger Series Creative Seeds Fellowship Series. Speaking of fellowship, I'm going to take a moment just to invite everyone in our live audience and our audience at home to consider coming to see the play. There may still be a few spots left. It's a play for volunteers that's happening at 4 different food assistance agencies in Los Angeles, where you as an audience member will also be a volunteer. You'll have a chance to make sack lunches while the action of the play is happening around you. So you can check that out at cornerstonetheater.org. Cornerstone Theater, that's theater.org, and find out where you can get your tickets to see the play. We've got, I think, a couple more weeks, one more week of performances. So let's get in on that. Now I'm going to introduce our very esteemed and very knowledgeable guests. We have with us Robert Egger from L.A. Kitchen and Luis Yepiz from L.A. Kitchen. I'm sorry, from Food Forward. Yes. And Iesha Siler from Los Angeles Food Policy Council. And we're going to talk today about food waste and hopefully more about food recovery and how we can avoid wasting food. So I'm going to give each of you a chance to tell us a little bit about your agencies and how you handle that issue of food waste. So Iesha, why don't we start with you?
Sure. So I work for the LA Food Policy Council. I'm a policy associate, and we're basically a collaborative of stakeholders that come together to work with policymakers to change the food system and improve it and build one that's better and healthy and affordable and accessible for all of LA City, LA County. One of our main working groups, we have 6 active working groups, and one of the main ones is food waste recovery and prevention, and that's how we bring stakeholders together from Bureau of Sanitation, from public health, from LA Kitchen, Food Finders, Food Forward, to come together and sit together in one table, one room to talk about how
connecting government agencies,
collaboration,
nonprofit organizations, and interested volunteers.
And we talk about food recovery and composting and how to basically bridge hunger, food insecurity, and the immense amount of food waste that takes place every day.
Fantastic. And we're going to get more into that composting stuff because I'm really interested in that. So Luis, tell us about Food Forward and the incredible food recovery you guys are doing.
Well, I work for Food Forward, and we are a food recovery organization. We collect food that would otherwise be wasted from backyards, meaning that we go into your residential homes and we collect the food that is hanging on your trees that is not harvested. We collect food from farmers markets, meaning at the end of the day, whenever anyone that has a stand in the farmers market, they cannot sell their produce, they tell us which produce they're not able to sell, and then they donate it instead of throwing it in the trash. And we also do recovery from the wholesale market and wholesalers, meaning those companies that sell to supermarkets and to restaurants
and to food banks.
And to food banks. And we use approximately 7,000 volunteers a year, which are mostly focused on the backyard harvest program and the farmers market recovery. And we have on the wholesale recovery program, which I am the manager of. It's a professional program. We have a staff of 3, and we work every day at the wholesale market, starting very early at 4 in the morning. And we collect approximately anywhere between 60,000 pounds to 100,000 pounds of food every day, and we distribute it to many food banks all over Southern California. Our food is now being distributed in about 8 counties in Southern California.
Fantastic, thank you so much. And Robert, tell us how you are taking food waste and turning it into not just meals, but also opportunities and life experience and a whole host of other things.
Yeah, man, but before I do, I just got to give props. I'm honored. These 2 are so exciting. I love Food Forward. I love the Food Policy Council. Rick, the founder of Food Forward, and I are both on the Food Policy Council's leadership board. And I'm just going to, if you don't mind, I'm just going to give them a little love because
Absolutely.
The Food Policy Council, one of the reasons I relocated from Washington, D.C., where I led the D.C. Central Kitchen for 25 years, is they were really active in policy. So it's really more than just getting people to the table. It's like the idea, we come to the table and say, how do we actually help government create policies that will either make it easier for people to donate food, or a variety of other things that again, chip away at the problem. So the Good Food Purchasing Act, which was spectacular, saying, in effect, every city agency that spends more than $10,000 a year on food needs to make an effort to buy local, which is a tremendous opportunity to potentially take food that might have been thrown away, that you buy, and reprocess in something that you can then sell, so for the school system, for senior meals, a variety of other things. So tremendous organization. And Food Forward, in just a very, very short 5-6 years, has become this Goliath of moving incredible fruits. It started as a backyard gleaning program, has evolved now into probably the major mover of fresh fruit and produce in Southern California. So again, man, props to the gang here today.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And I can say for us, I mean, Food Forward is an example of what we sometimes don't want to see, which is new nonprofits bringing up. But in fact, Food Forward fills a void that, we at the Westside Food Bank were sometimes being asked to fill, and we were ill-equipped to do so. We didn't have the volunteer force. That wasn't really the focus of our mission and our work. So when you guys came along and started doing that food rescue, we were like, great. And Food Forward actually has a key to our warehouse to bring some of that food in.
Yeah. But one thing was, when I started in this business, I started getting food from restaurants and hotels and caterers, prepared food. The original food bank system, starting in Arizona with the St. Mary's Food Bank, was primarily non-perishable, donated product from industry. A generation of us came along, kind of young whippersnappers at the time, and said, dudes, are you kidding? Look at all these restaurants. It's tons of food, particularly in cities where there's a convention center and big halls. So we were pulling in tons of food every day, prepared food. But the idea was, rather than just pick it up and drop it off, which was kind of the city harvest model we were talking about early in New York City, the first prepared food program.
Yes.
Our thing was bring it to a central kitchen and do something with it. You can feed more people better food for less money if you consolidate and you kind of create meals out of random donations, but also do job training. Instead of just feeding the poor, let's make an attempt to use donated food to kind of give people the skills they need to go get jobs in the very same restaurants that donated food. So it's a great kind of quid pro quo business model. It's like, you donate food, and I'll turn around and help people off the street in front of your restaurant and return an entry-level people who can help you make more money. Trying to incentivize the reason for restaurants to donate food. And I'm sure as we're going to get into it, what I started to notice is the supply of food, for a million different reasons, was starting to diminish. You really couldn't count, as generous as people were, and as really, places like Marriott, for example, the Marriott family could not have been more generous, and they really, on a national level, said, it is a company policy, we won't throw away food. But as much as they took that, you saw within an industry, chefs in particular coming out of dozens and hundreds now of cooking schools, pouring into restaurants saying, I can cut that waste. So as I started to look out at the future, and given the fact that between us we serve an estimated 45 million people in America who rely to a certain extent on food banks and pantries and food recovery programs, the question becomes, man, we're responsible, whether it's good, bad, right, or wrong, we're still responsible to try and get them a decent meal. Where's the food going to come from? And fruits and vegetables, man, that's the future.
At the same time, because chefs started becoming more efficient, the wholesalers started having less sales. And therefore, that's when groups like, that is when recovery programs for wholesalers started becoming more and more popular. For example, we had Mickey Wise that started, in 89?
Dude, what a dude, yeah, the wholesaler of the hungry.
Yeah, so
I think you're the only guy who knows about Mickey. He's like a legend.
Well, I've been around the wholesale market for now about 30 years.
He's a great dude.
Yeah, so
So tell us.
so
Sorry.
So Mickey Wise was a wholesaler that decided that he saw too much produce being thrown in the trash. So he started. He got a little piece of the wholesale market, a dog on the side, and he started collecting all the produce that wholesalers were planning to throw away and consolidating it and giving it to agencies. Agencies would come and pick up at the wholesale market.
I see.
That kind of all died down, mostly because wholesalers started started giving them way too much trash, and it became an issue. The main issue that most people that collect wholesale produce have is the quality issue.
Sure.
We need to be really vigilant about quality, because it is a product that that has diminished returns, that is on on a timetable. So one of the main things that I train the people that work with me and the people in this sector is to be very vigilant about the quality and because produce inside of cardboard boxes or the waste package is considered refuse for the dumps, and it costs about $45 to $50 a ton to be able to dispose it. So when you are a nonprofit that barely has
Yeah, you don't want
operating
food agencies to become the free dumping grounds for the produce that
and to
nobody wants to
Just
pay
to stick
to.
on Mickey for a second, because dude, he never gets it. This guy, he's the guy who introduced me to this issue. I mean, I met him in like 1993, something crazy like that in DC, and he was a prophet for food waste in wholesalers.
Yes.
And started a program called the Wholesale of the Hungry, and that spread around the country. There were 2 professors from UCLA. But this whole movement we're talking about has been an interesting almost 30 years.
Amazing how one person can have such an influence on shaping an entire movement across the country.
I think about John Arnold, the guy who started food banking in St. Mary's Food Bank.
That's right.
And Mickey Weiss. So I'm always mesmerized by the people who come up with an interesting new idea. But I'm glad I started to riff on that
Well,
because he's such a cool
hopefully
dude.
out of these discussions, we will have the next generation of people who are coming up with new innovative ideas, especially incorporating some of the technology advances that have made such a difference and changed our lives in other ways. You know, being able to hopefully inspire some people who are way techier than I'll ever be to come up with some technology solutions. But I want to go back to this idea that you bring up about perishable food and how you manage that. Because I know, like Robert, I know at LA Kitchen you find ways to sort of squeeze literally every little bit of life out of produce that might otherwise be thrown away.
Well, to Louise's point, a lot of stuff comes in cosmetically blemished, and that's the whole point. Now, in one theory, you can say, well, look, we'll do a job training program for either younger men and women aging out of foster care or older men and women home from prison, and we'll teach them a skill while they lop off that bruise. But the question becomes, what about the bruise? I mean, you might not want to visually look at it and eat it in a salad, but can you make something out of that spent stuff? So whether it's juices, we've really, really dug into juices and broths. Because what's driving a lot of this too was, interestingly enough, historically, food banks, the pantries, we just redistributed whatever we got. But suddenly you had a generation of consumers that were like, I have diabetes, I have hypertension, I'm just knowledgeable and I don't want any more processed food. So what you have is a very interesting new group of people who might be poor, but they're not dumb. They want healthy food. So this idea of really getting deep into it, can we slice, dice, puree, zest?
Right.
How much, we're even dehydrating like pineapple cores now or avocado pits. How far can we take it to avoid throwing stuff away? Oh, avocado pits are crazy, full of protein, but it's just dehydrated first and then put it into a blender, you get a powder, and boom, you can do all kinds of things with it.
Yeah,
Well, I just learned something new.
so coming back to the whole thing about the diminishing life produce, it is an issue because wholesalers are there to make a profit,
Right.
and they always want to hold on to the product until the very end. So they're always trying to sell it. The big thing with produce, especially at the wholesale level, is that it's almost like a commodity system. The price varies from day to day,
Sure.
depending on the seasons, on how much product comes in, on all types of natural events. It rains too much in one part of the world.
The border
There's
gets
an
shut
earthquake.
down.
The border gets shut down. The port has a
Strike,
strike.
yeah.
Right.
And that is the reason why prices vary so much in produce. As somebody that does the work of collecting that produce, I have to be in touch with what the market is, what the prices are, and how the market is working. Sometimes I get donations out of the price of watermelons went down, and people, the market cannot sell it for the cost. So instead of selling it, they go ahead and donate the product because they know they're going to have new product come in. But I think that food waste is really, it has a lot to do also with people's perception of food. And the fact that people look at a certain blemish or look at a certain quality issue and they decide that they will no longer bear it. They will no longer buy it. if standards were to be lowered just a bit, there would be so much more produce available for all people, and it would be at a much lower price. Because the wholesalers have this issue that they have to sell perfect produce so that the supermarkets or the restaurants are able to sell it.
Right.
Otherwise,
So that's a whole other issue, because that's about creating an awareness and sort of a public information campaign.
that is right.
I actually just learned about this organization that contacted us, Imperfect Produce, who is using the model of, glorifying imperfect produce and actually providing it to communities at 30 to 40% cheaper, and they get it directly from the farmers. So instead of the farmers just not harvesting it and turning it in, they're connecting with them directly to now start like a CSA program, a community supported agriculture program, where they're using this imperfect produce model to rescue this food.
Well, and I think the consumer demand is going to play a critical role there, because like you're saying, Robert, when people are asking for healthier foods and possibly not being able to afford them in the way the current system is structured, then there's going to have to be a way to meet that demand.
Well, you know what's fun though, is what people don't get, and one of the things that I find most enjoyable is, most wholesalers, if something's ripe that day, they're not going to sell it because, everybody, a grocery store, people want something that's going to ripen over a couple of days.
That's right.
It's most joyful is we're redistributing the most flavorful food you can possibly get. But to dig deep down into this issue,
Well, and that can overcome some of the perception as well.
right. The big issue for us is time and temperature. I mean, in all of our business, anybody in food recovery, it's time and temperature. Food that's been out, now we're not talking about fruit and produce, but I mean, food that's been out for 4 hours or more, that idea of refrigeration, because if you think about one of the conundrums we face, by the time something goes from a field to a wholesaler or to a food bank to a pantry to a home, you've got this kind of cascading decay in which a lot of its nutritional content has gone. So this is what interested me is, and again, I'm just one little small piece, but this idea of how our volunteers engaged, pureeing them, putting them in a bag, shrink wrapping it, freezing it, and then it's available indefinitely. So this idea, many of us are trying to chip away at the idea of time and temperature, and technology, and we were talking about earlier, cryovac is a fascinating concept for us. Big part, we have 2 big cryovac machines there.
Wow, I'd love to see that.
At the same time, for example, in food recovery with wholesalers, that is the reason why Food Forward's Wholesale Recovery Program is actually a just-in-time program. We collect the produce coming out of the refrigerators, and within an hour is anywhere it needs to be. Unless it's a longer trip, let's say if we have the San Diego Food Bank come to pick up a load, they come with a reefer, with a refrigerator truck. But we actually pride on making sure that the food, as soon as it is picked up, it gets to the place where it's going to get distributed within an hour, no more than an hour.
So are there things that can be done on the policy end of things to, first of all, incentivize not holding on to the food until the bitter end? Are there ways that we can create incentives for those wholesalers, for businesses to actually want to donate, to see something in it for them?
Yeah, well, I was going to say there's tax incentives right now for organizations or corporations, businesses that donate. I mean, that's been around for a while. Robert could probably tell you a little bit about that. But recently, the city of LA, they have this new thing called the Zero Waste Franchise System, where it just actually, the final signature took place on December of 6 to 7 years of working hard with Bureau of Sanitation, with folks in the environmental field and labor field to basically hold the city and the waste haulers that are going to be contracted with the city to higher standards, and not only for diverting organics from food waste, organics and food waste from the landfill, but also making sure that it goes to folks that need it the most. So in their contracts, it literally says you must partner in cooperation with food rescue organizations to divert any edible surplus food.
This is a huge deal.
It's
Yeah.
huge.
To get a city to say to its trash companies, you must, part of the contract now will be to do this.
Yeah,
This is
it is.
huge.
Yeah, and so right now that's in the sort of planning phase?
Right, so right now, the waste haulers, there's 7 of them, they're actually going to be meeting with their customers and their zones and doing waste characterizations to see how much of their waste is recyclable, how much of their waste is food waste, and of the food waste, how much of it is edible food waste that can be
Diverted to an agency.
or composted which will phase in later in this plan. But yeah, that's like the biggest thing that has recently happened in the city of LA. So we're really excited, and we're actually hosting a holler meet and greet, a food recovery holler meet and greet on Tuesday. Both of these guys. Both of these
So
guys will
that's
be there. Yeah.
incentivizing the food, the haulers, the waste management. Is there anything corresponding for the businesses
Well,
that are possibly being serviced by those
what
haulers?
I've always done, since I started in food recovery is, I pride myself in educating the wholesalers. In, explaining about the benefits of a tax receipt, explaining that if they want to be able to save those disposal fees, they have to be able, they need to donate
So
the
there's a
produce before it
financial
goes bad. And also, just talking to them. I'm at the market every day talking to them, explaining to them about the benefits of donating the produce and the great good that they do in the communities. So that's a daily thing that I do. Perpetuating keeping those relationships fresh and explaining to them the incentives of doing
And
that.
can you talk a little bit about, or maybe Robert, either one of you could speak to the Good Samaritan
I
law
was just gonna say.
and how
yeah,
that plays into this, and
protected.
talk a little bit about what that is, how that protects donors.
Well, I must admit, it's the joy of being an old dude. I actually helped, work on that with Secretary Dan Glickman, and got to go to the White House in 1996 when President Clinton signed it. That was a huge deal because there is never ever, and this is a big part to loop in.
Okay.
There's been this urban myth since I've been young that the health department doesn't want you to donate food. Never ever anywhere in America has there ever been a law precluding. In fact, every state had laws that said, in effect, unless it's a case of gross negligence or malicious intent, you won't be held liable if you donate to a charity. All these were on the books. The Bill Emerson Act, or what's now known as the Bill Emerson Act, was the first national umbrella law that said this is a federal thing. Now, to our knowledge, there's never been, and which is shocking when you really think about, because the network of prepared food programs, which is probably, of all the things we did, that was probably the riskiest. Fruits and vegetables. So he took it upon himself and developed this whole Orange County Food Rescue. There's a lot of other groups. But in fact, wanted to put the imprimatur of the head of the Department of Health. Now LA County, their Department of Health, same thing. This idea of we will not allow the Department of Health to be an excuse. We're going to make sure every inspector knows how to tell every restaurant, we've got no beef. You should be donating food.
Yeah.
Well, that's a really good thing to know, because I think that a lot of people still have that misconception that you could be liable for donating food. And it's also on, for those of us in food recovery, it makes it all the more important to be very discerning about the food that we accept and making sure that we are accepting good quality food, because essentially it means that we're taking responsibility for it.
That is essential. That is essential.
Yeah, because I think the terror for many of us is one bad, for example, another interesting group that popped up years ago was the Food Recovery Network, which were college students, a generation of millennials that started going to their cafeterias on campus saying, in fact, we want to collect this food. And they started doing it. And when we first, in fact, it's the two guys from Imperfect Produce that are now up in San Francisco that did this at the University of Maryland. But it was fascinating because as an advisor to them was a sense of dudes, you have a heavy responsibility. Because, there's a network, there's a whole national network of people that do this, and you have to be really careful. It's not just picking it up, whatever's donated. There's real priorities about time, temperature, what you take, what you don't, the containers you distribute it in, where the food is delivered to, and their ability to handle things properly. It's, gross negligence is a big giant doorway, but that aside, nobody wants to get really sick. I mean, we're all really hyper about it,
That is true, yeah, definitely.
So I wanted to talk a little bit about something you brought up, which is composting. And I'd be interested in hearing more about what your agency is doing to further that.
So I think we can't ignore that. Aside from the edible surplus food that gets to hunger relief sites, there will always be food scraps. There will always be some sort of food, like you said, the wholesale market. It's such a small time delivery where some of it still has to be thrown away.
Well,
Like if it's overly ripe, or someone's not going to want to take it, or there's always going to be some sort of waste at the end.
that is true.
And not all of it can always be donated.
So what can we do to
Exactly.
get something out of that?
So aside from Don't Waste LA, the city is going to be phasing in composting green bins later in this plan, but it's not happening this year.
Okay,
But
but it's in the works.
it's in the works, so yes. But groups like LA Compost are trying to build community compost hubs. Basically, Michael Martinez is a founder, and he's part of our working group. I think LA Compost is partnering with you as well, to basically make sure that food that is wasted or food scraps stays in the same zip code. So trying to also not have it imported or shipped to a landfill, or having it sent to composting facilities that are actually just really high priced, and it doesn't make sense for folks to actually send to the composting facilities. They try to keep it local and actually make it as a place to teach community about education, about how food is actually not waste, it's a resource, and if it can't be served to hunger sites, then it needs to be returned to the soil to feed the soil and regenerate the soil. So
that's really interesting because you bring up, and this is something I think we probably all think about when we see food waste, which is, it isn't just that the food is being wasted and someone could have eaten it, it's also, there was resources that went into that. The packaging, the water, the nutrients, the labor to pick it, the transportation to bring it to wherever it got to. So it sounds like
all of it is being wasted.
Yeah.
40%.
So if we can recover the resources that have already been invested into that food, it sounds like that's what this composting can do, even for the stuff that can't be rescued.
Right. It's following the trajectory more of nature, like this closed loop system where everything feeds something else, and it's like nutrients giving it to another set of nutrients given to. So composting kind of basically closes that cycle and returns all of the food scraps back to the soil.
Now, may I ask you a question? What are you doing in regards to capacity?
So right now we do not have the infrastructure. So
Yeah.
if everyone, so even with food recovery, the infrastructure, like we were saying, is not there for every single piece of food to be recovered and then distributed to a food bank or home relief site. It's not there, and that's
We're working
something
on that.
Exactly. We're working on it. So even as we venture with these haulers next week, introducing them to the idea, because edible surplus food is a whole new game for these haulers. They're in the business of just landfilling.
Right.
So
transporting.
exactly.
Yeah.
So a part of it is just introducing them to the idea of what food recovery is, introducing them to the idea of food insecurity. It's just a whole different world.
This
for them.
brings up,
Yeah.
and probably the stickiest wicket is, what you're gonna see is very progressive legislatures or legislators wanting to ban food waste. And yet there's not gonna be money, the infrastructure that's required. They're gonna end up relying on mom and pop charities
Right.
to raise money, rattle cups, to get refrigerated trucks. And this demands a very mature, kind of urban planning approach to what's the relationship now with charitable organizations. You can't just assume that charities can somehow go out and fundraise to get this equipment. So composting in particular is a very big issue because it takes a lot of land, and quite frankly, there's a certain aroma attached to composting.
Well, funding is great, and having the infrastructure is great, but I believe that being creative is actually a great way of being able to reduce this.
Well, it's how every nonprofit has thus far survived, just by being nimble.
Yeah, by being creative. For example, at the wholesale market, with the wholesalers, I could see there being at least, last year, the Wholesale Recovery Forward moved about 14 million pounds. I could see that doubling if I had the infrastructure in place. So it's gonna have to be not necessarily having trucks and drivers, but getting stakeholders to be able to distribute. There's a large pile of food that is sitting in the middle of Los Angeles, and there's a large need for that food, but we just don't have the bridges. And what I'm focusing on, what my program is focusing on, our program at Food Forward is focusing on, is in creating bridges between that food and need. And money is gonna be necessary, and infrastructure is gonna be necessary, but we also have to be creative in finding ways to move it without, using everything that is at our disposal.
Before we came on, we were talking about Burlington, Vermont.
Yeah.
And Burlington's got a thing called the Intervale system, which is fascinating. It's this idea of a city saying, let's really compost in a large way. This was driven a lot by Ben and Jerry's, and there was a lot of, it was a very fascinating city. And this isn't a bunch of hippies. This is smart business, you know.
People from the university.
But their goal was to say, yeah, the big land grant, one of the first, Vermont was the first place to introduce land grant universities in the ag schools. But this idea of, can we grow enough, I think that their goal is 6 or 7% of their own food within city limits. Actually, Riverside would be a tremendous, Riverside has huge amount of land within city limits. They have their own water. And they're really into it. And this idea of, I think it would be fascinating. I actually challenged last year in a speech to a bunch of Riverside. If you all threw it down and said, Riverside's going to be the first city to grow 10% of its own food within city limits. And if you want to be part of that experiment, come to Riverside right now. I think it would be almost a modern gold rush of young people who would be so inspired. And to Louise's point about
Sure.
So this idea of right now is like how many new fresh eyes, whether it's an older retiree, a young person, how can we get people to look at things and say, you know what, have you thought of this? And that's really what our sector is desperate for right now.
Yes. And obviously we're all creating, as we keep doing this, we're creating new ideas and we're trying to develop 2014. And I looked at the problem, looking at their system, at the way they compost, the way they recover the scraps from restaurants and from all different types of establishments. And I was thinking, in order to create that system in LA, first of all, it would be almost impossible to be able to get the land to be able to do the composting.
Yeah.
So that facility would have to be moved to the high desert. And the transportation cost to move waste to the high desert would be very prohibitive. So now the way I'm looking at this, possibly a network or smaller. Community neighborhood composting.
Right.
Yeah. But in order to create you think about the scale. Los Angeles is basically a regional food hub. We provide food to people in the East Coast. I remember being at the Hunts Point Wholesale Market, which is in the Bronx, in New York, and talking to the wholesalers, and they knew the same people that I work with here because they buy produce from them.
Yeah.
Or like sitting, think about this. Los Angeles receives all the produce from the Central Valley, from Mexico, from Chile through the port, from South America, and even from Asia.
Yeah.
And it is our job, because we have the transportation infrastructure and the warehouses and the refrigerators, it is our job to basically distribute that food all over the country. And the food waste that is generated from those processes is enough to not only feed all of Los Angeles, but to feed all of Southern California and possibly the Southwest. We just need to get that.
An interesting little thing that, just as we have to have kind of look both ways, because we have to think about where's food coming from, which has been our conversation. We have to think where's it going, right? And a big issue is the changing face of poverty in America. So historically, our system was food banks and pantries that were designed in an era for able-bodied, unemployed people who could get a box of commodity foods or whatever was donated and go home. The face of hunger now is a single mom with jobs or an old person. So whether it's time or whether it's physical ability, suddenly we have this genuine cool desire to distribute more food, but the system we have for distributing it might not be able to get the food at the time and the place where people have been. So there's barriers of cultural knowledge. Time is a huge one. Does a working mom have time to go through all the odds and ends that we can gloriously assemble?
That's where models like yours come in perfectly.
Yeah, can you speak a little bit about your model at LA Kitchen and how you are serving that older population?
Well, it's a continuation of this idea of a kitchen. And so I've helped open kitchens in food banks, but also in schools, campus kitchens. I'm very interested right now in rural poverty. We were talking about this earlier. We had such a great pre-conversation.
Yes.
But, could a community college or a high school in a rural town and an existing cafeteria or a retrofitted cafeteria become a place where an after-school cooking club, intergenerational garden, intergenerational with compost, intergenerational after-school mentoring program where older people can come? And imagine an after-school cooking program taking food that's either donated or grown by the intergenerational garden, learning skills and cooking, or math, science, and all the things that go into cooking, for an after-school mentoring program where seniors who need to stay active and productive are teaching kids meals to go for working parents. I'm really mesmerized by the idea of both processing food. So again, you stabilize it, you teach skills, you engage volunteers. And you know, I know it's a little bit of a leap, but what I'm interested here in LA is obviously the food we're talking about, but LA is the largest concentration of older people. And you want to talk about waste in America? Wrinkle food, wrinkle people, we push them away. And this idea of saying, just as that piece of lettuce with a slight wilted leaf still has value, so does that older person, you know, with that gray hair or that wrinkle or that stoop. You know, and what we're trying to say is no waste, period. And let's see, is there a way we can take both food and people, whether it's people coming out of the prison system or a variety of different things. How can we engage a larger community, not necessarily in kind of an experiment in agriculture, but an experiment in agriculture? You know, how do we reintroduce the bond that we lost in, you know, what people don't really get their head around, I love talking about, the end of World War II, for the first time in the history of the world, an army came home and didn't go back to the farm. That had never ever happened ever in the history of the world. And California was a place where they combined refrigeration, transportation, immigration, you know, and suddenly, in the middle of winter in Montana, you could get a lemon or lime or a pineapple or a tomato. And it was a miracle.
Yes.
And what you had is an army of young people who were like, we forget that agriculture, and you know what's so wild is metaphorically, we literally unscrewed the top of bombs, leftover munitions, and took ammonium nitrate, and that became the fertilizer that created this farm system. And for a generation, this was science come true. For
The Green Revolution.
yeah, for like 20,000 years, people dreamed of being untethered. So here it is almost 2.5 generations later, and we're trying to find our way back to some sense of connectivity again. And it's clumsy, but that's the journey that we're talking about here today.
So the place where I was born 3 blocks away from Norman Berglow Boulevard in Mexico.
Wow.
Which is literally, they had an experimental lab, an agricultural experimental lab in the Yaqui Valley in northern Mexico, where I grew up. At that time, both my grandfathers were still farmers, and we saw the increase in productivity, but also, you know, everything that came with the pesticides and all
Right.
and all the. But it's funny. I remember, like, I used to live 3 blocks. I was born 3 blocks away from Norman Berglow Boulevard, which is the man that started the Green Revolution in Minnesota.
But this is what so much we're interested in, is this weird nexus of both science and social issues, but again, there is a great sense of curiosity. What did we leave behind? And I think to a certain extent, while we're talking about hunger, what many of us, whether it's the 7,000 volunteers that come, or what's the people who show up, you know, to the Food Policy Council meetings, or the people who are watching, there's this deeper hunger people have.
The connection to the land.
I want, or to each other.
To each
I
other.
want to feel like I'm contributing. I am somebody. I'm doing something. So I think what we have in the food community, which some of us reach out for purposely, is that idea of how can I use food to achieve multiple things. I can feed people, to be sure, but I can engage. I can teach somebody. I can make somebody who is older feel needed again. You know, there's a kid who can learn. So the idea is you can do this all simultaneously. So I think to Louise's point, you know, to all of our points, is that idea of really saying food, if we just see it as gas for the body, then we're missing this bigger opportunity to see it really, it's really fuel for a social revolution. And I think that's what many of us really dig about it.
I mean, you think about San Bernardino County, just an hour and a half from us. You have towns that are an hour away from the nearest grocery stores. You have towns in which the only food source is a McDonald's or maybe a Baker's or some fast food restaurant. And those communities depend on the food that depend on the food that is donated to that is given to them by the food banks, by their pantries. You have the Community Action Coalition of San Bernardino County, which is responsible for actually making deliveries all the way to Needles, all the way to all those little towns in San Bernardino, to help those people that, you know, if they have any money, they would spend all their money in gas just to get to the nearest, and that's what those kitchens and that model that you're talking about would be beautiful.
Well, you know, this is what part of, we didn't touch on was that idea of how can we do the charitable side, donate food, but let's start our own business. Again, if no one will hire a 50-year-old woman. Fastest growing ranks unemployed as a 50-year-old woman, or 50 and older. If they can't find a job, let's create our own jobs. Why curse our hand at the fates when we can adapt and create those jobs ourselves? So the idea that we've been pursuing for a couple of years now is buying reduced price product, which allows us to pay good wages and produce a scratch cooked meal, whether it's for school food as we did in DC. I'm very interested in senior meal contracts with the city. The idea of, if I can support a farmer and I can pay a good wage and I can produce revenue to underwrite the cost of the training program, I'm closed loop, I'm independent of the need to go out and beg for money, which also means I can do advocacy and be a little bit more politically engaged, which ultimately I think is one of the things that we've tried to defeat hunger with redistributed food, when I think we should really have been doing policy
Yeah, I
all
think that's
along.
where policy steps in to really guide the process, support the process, and incentivize folks to continue in this process. And you guys are on the ground doing the work, but policymakers are the ones that are actually kind of calling the shots. So it's important that we are able to address and increase awareness with them and address our concerns. And that's why I think the Food Policy Council is great in the way that we're able to be the bridger between the policymakers and the folks on the ground doing the hard work.
At the same time, we start the work so the policymakers could make the policies to catch up.
Exactly,
to the
and to continue to support, and to continue to support and try to bring
exactly.
funding and leverage the work that you guys are doing.
Yeah.
Well, and on the policy level, I mean, ultimately, policymakers and legislators work for the people. So
Exactly.
I think
Yes.
that when we can
Exactly.
educate the people to put pressure on policymakers, so that it isn't just those of us in hunger advocacy specifically who are doing that, but actually the public at large, that's a huge mission. So we're putting a call out for ambassadors. We want people to help spread this message. And I think, you know, what you bring up about a different model, you know, I'm curious as to whether you think that there is a call for, I mean, it sounds like you're saying there is a need for perhaps looking at a for-profit model rather than a nonprofit model, or in cooperation with a
Hybrids.
nonprofit
It's the hybrid,
model.
you know, if you look at what we're doing, now let's go back to policy, right? We helped co-develop this thing called LA Prep, the biggest food incubator space. There's 55 kitchens, 60,000 square foot, we're about 20,000 square feet of it, right? One of the reasons I wanted to do this is, obviously from a business perspective, I have 50 different places that might hire graduates, we can buy food from one another, it's good business. But policy, every mayor in America wants a food hub. And they're looking for an example. So they come to LA Prep and they see LA Kitchen. Now, when they see us, they're like, you know, wow, food recovery, job training, that they see all this stuff, and they immediately become open to this issue, which I'm very passionate about, with senior poverty. This is profound, what's going on in every city in America. There's no big plan. So I'm trying to draw attention.
Well, we're about to have the largest population of senior adults.
Who don't have any money in the bank.
Yeah.
But if they see us and they say, wow, LA Kitchen, I'm like, dude, I'm open source. I'll help you open one. I'll be thrilled. But what I really want them to see is I'm a social enterprise, which means my motivation isn't exporting profit to satisfy external shareholders. My job is to reinvest in the community. So if I'm a mayor, I see all this stuff, but what I hear is keep the money local. And so what I'm trying to do is do all this stuff at one level, but from a policy perspective, I want mayors across America to say, let me get this straight. He's talking about a senior meal contract, but we have dozens of contracts. Can I do this same thing with other contracts? Can I, instead of investing in multinational companies that'll do processed food, low wages, and exported profit, there's this new model, social enterprise, and they do all this cool stuff and reinvest profit. Hallelujah. And that's the real revolution that I'm selling.
Well, at the same time, I'm looking at creating community nonprofit groups that are able to fulfill the needs of their own communities. In Boyle Heights, we're very lucky to help actually a church, the Church of Resurrection, that had been around distributing food since the 70s. And we were able to provide them the produce so they would be able to increase the distribution and reach many more people. I'm trying to build a network of small pantries that are able to do that are able to create, as I said before, creating bridges, make sure that the foods get to those it needs. But there's a lot of goodwill, but there's a lot of places that don't have the infrastructure, they don't have the forklift to be able to
Right.
unload it.
Well,
And
and
they
I
don't
think
have-
that we need to overcome some of our own, and by us, I mean the community at large, our own perceptions about what a nonprofit organization does and how we invest in them. I think that there's long been this idea that nonprofit organizations should exist on a shoestring and that they shouldn't invest in infrastructure. And the truth is, clearly, we need to invest in infrastructure. And I
Definitely.
think that there is a movement, certainly here in Los Angeles with the California Endowment and the Weingart Foundation and Parsons Foundation,
Yeah.
to really, and many others, to rethink that idea that nonprofits shouldn't be able to invest in infrastructure, and that hiring great talented people, and that investing in buildings and in refrigerators and in trucks, all of those are the
Providing
things
services.
that we need
Yeah,
in order to
exactly.
provide our services.
So we have this, once again, going back to the Church of Resurrection, it's a group of volunteers that have been there as volunteers for the last 25 to 30 years
And
within
that
the
needs to be
community.
professionalized,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
that their knowledge and their system
Yeah,
can be supported in a way so that they don't always have to rely on volunteers. I mean, that's what I would love to see
Yeah.
personally, is a lot of these organizations that are doing such great work,
yeah,
and have them be professionalized in a way that there are enough staff members and enough supportive infrastructure to capitalize on the many volunteers that want to help,
yeah.
but that can also be there when volunteers fluctuate, so that there's a consistency.
So with these new contracts, we're wanting the haulers to see the food recovery organizations not as folks they can just partner with to move food, but folks that they can fund and invest their infrastructure and pay $20,000, $100,000 to help food finders or food will forward to buy 7 more refrigerator trucks, or to employ 7 more people, but to see them as actually providing a service and to fund their services and not just continue to use them as a nonprofit that's just will do the work,
Right.
Yeah.
That's the real road. I mean,
Yeah.
honestly, I won't go too far
Yeah.
down this road, but
Infrastructure, yeah.
I've written a lot about gender origins of modern philanthropy, but believe me, this is a very gender structured construct. .org's charities are the feminized part of the American economy, and as such, they're treated as second-class businesses. So there is kind of a Seneca Falls moment for nonprofits that we should be racing towards. But, it's interesting, as we said last time, charity is about the redemption of the giver, not the liberation of the receiver. And historic charity has been that one-dimensional thing. And if you think about it, a generation of charities went out to feed the poor, and they went to the foundation world to get money, and it was basically white dudes giving away other white dudes' money. And they were never going to give these women-run businesses the economic freedom to do something powerful. But what's interesting is oftentimes, inadvertently, but that learned behavior and that power dynamic got transferred, and the same thing happened to poor people. Pantries, food banks said, here's a little bit of food, come back tomorrow, we'll give you more. We'll never give you enough to be independent. So you have this cascading system that's really, it's historic, but we must really be brave enough to potentially unpack a little of this and determine whether the charity structure, the way we distribute food, the way we advocate are getting the results we want. And I think by any measure, for all of our Herculean efforts, there's still 45 million people, man, at risk of hunger, and here come the baby boomers. So
Yeah.
it's now or never.
That is one of the biggest issues that I'm encountering. We have agencies that have the capacity to get more produce, but they limit themselves automatically.
Right. Well, it's
They don't wanna
International
distribute
Flash
it.
Day.
Well, is it because
so-
they don't have, is it because they don't have refrigeration? They don't have, what is it? Why?
Well, okay, let me put it like this. An agency has the capacity for $15,000, right? And they are able to distribute that at a nice pace, in which they will not force themselves, they will not overwork themselves, in which they would be comfortable doing it. I'm the opposite of that. I'm the complete opposite. I'm here to basically collect all the food that is available every single day at any time and make sure that it gets to the right place. But that attitude really does not help. In the part of some nonprofits, some nonprofits are comfortable doing what they do.
It's easy.
It's
It's
easy.
easy to fall into routine in life and your work anywhere. But
Yeah.
I think many of us in our business are so by any means necessary about it that it's hard to sometimes cotton why anybody wouldn't work as
Right.
hard as we do.
Yeah.
Well, Iesha, I wanted to go into a little bit about the investment that you were talking about, because I know that you mentioned that the idea is to have some of these haulers partner with nonprofits, but also invest in them.
Yeah.
And you mentioned to me earlier, Cal Recycle, and there being a possibility of funding being directed to some of the nonprofits to buy things like refrigerators, coolers, trucks.
Right, so there is funding that is coming online, hopefully in a couple of months. Currently, there's funding through an organics program through Cal Recycle to basically fund large composting facilities, or AD. We're actually interested in that, but more interested in the food recovery funding that's coming down. We heard it's going to be about $5 million. And when we spoke to one of our colleagues at Californians Against Waste, he's actually nervous that not enough people will apply.
Mm-hmm.
And if that happens, so everyone apply, please, even if your idea is half-baked, because we're not sure if we'll be able to get that funding again next year. So we need to demonstrate a need. So food recovery, the funding for food recovery will be able to provide for refrigeration, staffing.
And so the
hope to build
applicants
that
for that
infrastructure.
process would be nonprofit organizations that are working in food recovery?
Exactly.
Okay. And how can we find out
helping
about
them-
that?
I can, Cal Recycle, yeah.
Okay.
Google Cal Recycle Food Recovery. And it hasn't been released yet, but they're gonna be releasing in the next couple of months.
All right, we got the
Yes.
inside scoop here.
That is right.
They have a list
But
of.
you know what's going on there too, we haven't even
Yeah.
talked about, is a younger generation's apps. I mean, now,
So
I mean,
many
there
apps
are
coming
so many
online.
apps
Every
for
day there's
food
like,
waste.
yeah,
And I think there's, again, the jury is out, but nonetheless, there's a younger generation's entrepreneurial spirit
Yeah.
that is coming. And the question is, you know, how will it intersect with the very traditionalist at times charity sector?
That is the main issue that I see, for example, with some of the donors. The system at the wholesale market it's been the same for 80 years, for 100 years,
Yep.
since the market's been around. Some companies are different than others, but any effort to automate or to use apps or anything like that
There's
has
resistance.
automatic resistance. There's automatic resistance.
You know why Food Forward works? It's Luis and the team. If they call, they show up. The second somebody says, use my app, and nobody shows up when they
Yeah.
call, is when they throw up their hands. They
That-
want
But
it.
you're seeing that apps really revolutionizing how we act. And now, even within the food world, with food delivery, a big part of the messaging around some of those food delivery services is no waste. We are gonna deliver the exact amount of food that you need so that you don't have to buy in big
Or you
quantities.
mean the 100 meals
Right.
and stuff like
Yeah,
that?
And there's definitely kinks in those systems as well, but people are thinking about it.
Mhm.
And people are changing their behaviors.
Are going to be able to continue the work that we've been doing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, so that brings me to giving you each an opportunity to make a pitch. Give us a call to action. What can the people here in our audience, the people who are watching us at home, what do we need from them? I mean, we need them to be ambassadors. We need them to help spread the message. We need them to use the tools that are at hand, social media, et cetera. What is the message? And how can they help, and how can they get involved with your organization? So this time, Robert, I'll start with you.
Okay. Well, household waste still accounts for a lot. So it's your own personal habits, how you shop. That's first and foremost. Second, when you go out and you go to a restaurant, ask, what happens to this food? At the end of the day, particularly large events. I mean, if you're hosting, weddings, parties, you should be able to donate food. You pay for it. There's no health code reason you shouldn't be able to donate. So there's that side of it. But at the end of the day, I believe there shouldn't be an election in America in which candidates don't talk about food policy. There should not be an election anywhere in which candidates don't articulate school food, senior meals, food waste, composting, a wide variety of things. So LA Food Policy Council, to their credit, I'm going to throw it back once again. The last mayor's race was the second one that I know of in the United States. The first one being New York City, where candidates were asked food policy questions, and every single candidate responded to the Food Policy Council's questionnaire before the election. So that should be the norm from now on.
And give us your website.
www.lakitchen.org. Thank you very much.
All right, and do you have a need for volunteers? Can people get involved?
Yep, and we're really trying to go 24/7, 365. I mean, I sweated blood building that kitchen, sister. I ain't gonna close it if I don't have to. So, again, in fact, we're really opening up, and we're doing African American History Month, so we're having a wide variety of events that feature African American chefs, culinary, cooking, and then trying to convert some of the food that's donated into culturally appropriate meals so we distribute to the community.
Fantastic, I love it. Luis?
What I would say is that no matter what situation you're in, don't ever feel that there's nothing that you cannot do. I remember being a teenager and feeling that I couldn't donate to my favorite charity, and that I wish that I was able to do some things that I couldn't do because of the money that I made or because of my situation. And then I decided that I was gonna do anything that I could do to help out, no matter what. So I would say the key is, first of all, not being different. If you feel strongly about the cause of zero food waste or food recovery or helping those in need, even if it's 1 hour, half an hour, 15 minutes, a week, a month, a year, if you have that free time, volunteer. Do everything you could do to help the cause. So what I would say is just volunteer and, and be vocal. Speak about the issues that you're passionate about. We have several volunteer opportunities that put forward, and if you wanna make a difference in our community, we basically have a system that will allow you to do so.
Thank you.
And foodforward.org.
Perfect.
Yeah.
I would say definitely first know your council member. If you live in the city of LA, find out who your council member is and call them and let them know that you're interested in composting, whether you live in a multifamily house or residential, so they can make sure to really work on that and phase it in. So I would say know who represents you, so who is basically speaking for you, know who that is. And then come to our working group. Our food waste prevention and rescue working group meets every month on the 4th Wednesday around 2 o'clock, between 2 and 4. We usually meet at the California Endowment Community Partners. It's our regular meeting location, or at Lane. And I can send you my email, or my email is Siler, ISILER @goodfoodla.org. And I can put you on our listserv. And our website is goodfoodla.org.
Fantastic. Well, I want to thank you all so much. This has been incredibly powerful, incredibly informative. I would encourage those of you watching, if you haven't seen the other panel discussions that we had, they are going to be available, and we hope that you will tune in. But we hope that you'll stay engaged and really visit all the websites, find out what's happening, because there is a lot happening. We have hunger right here in our community, right here in Los Angeles. There's a huge amount of food insecurity, even among people where you wouldn't imagine it. I just was at an LAUSD event where I issued a challenge to uncover hidden hunger, and 7 teams of high school students wanted to take on that challenge. So I know this is something that we all care about, and I would just encourage you all to stay informed and get involved. And I'm going to say just one more time, if you have the opportunity to come to the play and to see fellowship and to see some of that work in action, visit cornerstonetheater.org to get information and maybe grab one of those last few tickets. So thank you to our panel, thank you to Cornerstone, thank you to our guests. And
May I say one more thing? We have enough food in Los Angeles to feed everybody that needs it. We do. We just gotta create those systems, and we cannot be complacent about this problem. Be proactive.
there you go.
Yeah.
Thank you.